You can hear me okay. I You won't be able to see me until I turn my screen off, but that's probably no great loss. So good morning, and I suppose also good evening to our and good afternoon to our friends around the world. When I was asked to speak on the subject, I was trying to think of things that I would have liked to have known or been told when I was starting off in life, and hence the title of this is really the test I was trying to come up with was how to make life easy for yourself structurally, addressing common legal and governance issues, and it's in part a reflection on the last 30 years that I've been a corporate lawyer dealing with these questions, that led me down this route, because governance tends to be a subject which isn't thought to be terribly exciting, and it can sometimes be thought to be a burden, but actually it can be a terrifically useful, freeing way in which to release the potential of organisations. By way of introduction, as Danny mentioned, I don't deal with many members directly on a day-to-day basis. That's not because I don't want to. I'd be happy to. And indeed, one thing I did want to convey in this, as I went along here, was that we do have within the IRL resources that which are available to members. I'm a special counsel for IRL, which my involvement with the IRL actually began with governance. In 2016, I worked with John Grant and David Collier at that time, and that led to changes in the board and the constitution and the articles of association of the RLIF as was and the IRL as is, and it gave me an insight into sort of the strengths and the peculiarities of working in international rugby league, and in particular, there was a great deal of discussion around independent directors and around the membership of the board, and making sure that the balance of the board was right, while also more generally looking at directors' duties in the round for an organisation where many of the board members wear other hats. They have other responsibilities, as indeed I think would be the case in most of our members as well. As that moved forward, I also became involved in a document called the RLIF Manual, which was a few hundred pages long, which was something of a labour of love. And what we did in that was take what all the guiding principles and the strategy and the vision as was of the IRL, and the governance provisions, the operational rules, disciplinary, sanctioning, player welfare, competitions, accession arrangements, and contact details. And what we were doing there was bringing the rules around the IRL all into one place. The IRL has only relatively recently existed as a separate freestanding organisation. It's not historically been a UEFA or a FIFA. It has developed its own governance, certainly in the 7 or 8 years that I've been involved in it. And that exercise in and of itself, I think, has been one that makes us well placed to discuss with the members how they look at governance, how they look at how they challenges that they may face, and the realities against which we're all working. I'm a corporate lawyer since 1991, and that's I'm a corporate English lawyer, and much of the points I'm going to make are going to be from an English law perspective. But it's worth bearing in mind that many of the Commonwealth group of countries, their legal systems are similar to the UK, and so a lot of I'm assuming that a lot of the principles would also apply in other countries. There are different jurisdictions. The French law is slightly different, but fundamentally, when it comes to government, is largely along the same lines. The laws of South America, Spanish law, would have more laws which were on a central basis. So less is written down individually by organisations in those sorts of countries, and so you do need local lawyers and local expertise to make sure that your organisations are run according to your local law if you're in non-English law, non-Commonwealth countries. It's just a peculiar, it's just an interesting sort of principle of English law that we try to make it so that we almost try to take the lawyers out of the process by making it as sort of instinctively obvious as we can. I've also been involved as trustee chair and secretary in charity since 1992. The reason I mentioned this was because in some respects it struck me that many of our members, because they're not-for-profit organisations, they would be organisations for whom governance might seem a bit intimidating and might seem a bit awkward and might seem a bit time-consuming when you've essentially got volunteers and you've essentially got people who are giving up their time. I appreciate that. And indeed, it's actually that experience alongside the work I've done as corporate lawyer, alongside the work I've done specifically on governance for the IRL, that I think I wanted to draw out today. That's led me to my overall conclusions and how to shape governance. There's something I should also mention on this, which is that I am a leaguey and have been a leaguey from birth. My great-grandfather was one of the original founder members of Wigan Rugby League Club. I've had his shares were passed down to my grandfather and my father and to me in turn. I've watched the international game wherever I can around the world, and the IRL's purpose and our purpose, everybody's purpose here, is fundamentally the same thing. We watch and we support and we administer the greatest game, and we want people to enjoy and experience the greatest game. And so everything that we do by way of governance is with a view to making sure that the Tamalolos of this world, the Mark Grahams of this world, the Puig Bears of this world, the Danny Messengers of this world, the Ellery Hanleys of this world get on the field, and we get to watch them, we get to enjoy them. What is good governance? I was looking at the RLAF manual this morning about governance, and it was really, really dull, the introduction I wrote to governance. It effectively focused on how the board was constituted, meetings that took place, how votes were cast, the powers of the chairman and the chief executives, and it went on to discuss AGMs and members' accession and members leaving, and the powers devolved to members. So it's hard. You could say, oh yeah, that's governance, but actually, well, it is, but actually this is a human endeavour. And what governance provides is a structure to the human beings that should benefit, should be a tool that benefits the human beings that are involved in organisations. And so it provides a bit of architecture, and I'll give some slides later on. I'll show some slides later on that illustrate my point here, that human endeavours generally go well when people know what they're meant to be doing, what's required of them, and how they're going to work together. So governance provides a structure within which humans can operate, within which we can all operate, to make sure that the greatest game gets watched and played. So it's a set of people, and I can't stress this too much, because I was looking again at the manual, and that's hundreds of pages, and I would suggest that I am the only person in the world that's ever read it. It is a set of rules, but life is too short to be reading hundreds of pages of documents. Good governance is a set of people. It enables a set of people to work together effectively within a set of rules, within a set of expectations. It's also a state of mind, and I don't want to sort of become too new age hippie about this, but it's while I appreciate that people won't be reading hundreds of pages, people ought to buy into and ought to appreciate the benefits of good governance, and ought to instinctively to be asking themselves, in whatever position they find themselves in, what is the correct way to do this? Who needs to know about this? How can these decisions be made? And that should become part and parcel of the day-to-day operations of good organisations. And they should know the answers to all these things as well, which I'll come to in a minute. A driver of the mission and the vision. So the good governance is a tool by which your mission, your vision can be realised. And I appreciate that each of you will have a separate mission and a separate vision, depending upon where you are in the life cycle of your organisation. And these should evolve over time. But if you look at if you take the IRL and you look at our constitution, you look at our articles, it is clear from the starting point that our mission is to encourage the development of international rugby league. So if good governance is not enabling you to meet your mission and your vision, don't change your mission, don't change your vision, change your governance, change your structure. If you're spending too much time doing things which aren't central to your mission and your vision, then you will have a lot of people that will become demotivated. You'll have rules that people will just either not follow or disregard, and your state of mind will be, oh, governance is just annoying. Okay. What are the benefits of governance? So these are internal and they're external. It's a sword and it's a shield. By this I mean that if you reach a point where the members understand what their roles and duties are, the board understands what its roles and duties are, its chairman understands their roles, the chair understands their roles and duties, the working groups understand their roles and duties, then that will drive on the organisation. You'll be efficient, people will enjoy it, people will know where they stand. It's also a shield, and we'll talk at the end of the presentation about things that may go wrong, things that have gone wrong over the years. And at this point, good governance is very important. I'll give you an example that we came across. So having spent all this time on the manual and realised that virtually nobody was ever going to read it, it did actually come in very handy at one point. We were involved in a litigation and we had to go speak to a barrister, which are these sort of legal gurus that you look at in the English law system. And the barrister had a look on our website and said, "Oh, could I have a look at the manual?" And then quoted extensively from the manual in our defence, which led to a successful outcome. So if you get this right, it should be a shield. It should help you when things go wrong. At the very least, you should be able to say to your stakeholders, to any external parties, we've got the systems in place to make sure that all these things are done properly. A way to ensure smooth progress. So this is this doesn't really apply to the RFLs and the NRLs of this world. This is more to do with smaller organisations as you look to grow and progress. If you get structure correct, then it will be a firm basis for you to proceed. It might seem over elaborate if you're at a point where actually your main priority is getting balls or getting coaches or getting referees to have a board and have to have AGMs. I get that. But equally, these are tried and tested methods that do lead to efficiencies and good lines of communication. It's a way to show the world professionalism. So while governance is useful as among the group of people that you're dealing with and among your members, it is also important when it comes to being able to demonstrate professionalism to the world. If you can, there's it is possible that in your dealings with press, in your dealings with auditors, in your dealings with government, in your dealings with any external body, or indeed if something goes wrong, that your governance will be looked at. People will say, who decided this? On what basis did they decide this? Who signed this check? What was their authority to do so? Where is it written down? What can you point to? So it's a way to show the outside world professionalism. It's also built to last. Many organisations, particularly smaller startup organisations, are basically the product of an individual or a small number of individuals, and that has strengths when it comes to clarity of vision and momentum and ability to drive things forward. But what we're looking for is the greatest game to continue to be the greatest game, not just next year, but in 5 years' time, in 20 years' time, in 15 years' time, in 20 years' time. We have the privilege of working with the finest set of rules and sport that humanity has come up with. And we want to make sure that this is a legacy that we can pass on to our children and our children's children. So good governance is, by its nature, built to last. Increased efficiency. This comes back to my point. You're dealing with human beings. Human beings like to know where they stand. They like to know what's required of them. They like to have goals. They like to know that they're achieving things. You will make more money. You will make more money because you'll free up. You'll be more efficient. You'll have more time to focus on commercial aspects. But moreover, if you come to apply for grants, if you come to apply for membership of broader bodies, if you look at going to see sponsors, then there will come a point at which, if you can say, okay, you can be content to sponsor us because we can show you that this is our board, this is our independent audits, this is our risk register. These things just, you're showing that you're more efficient, but moreover, if you're dealing with corporates like to see other corporates. Increased accountability internally and externally. So this applies because you are governing bodies, and we'll discuss a little bit later on how everything fits together, because you're both governing bodies and members of other organisations in your own right. And therefore, it allows new members, old members, to understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, who has authority to do things, why it is that these things are expected of them. It also should involve an element of your ability to say, okay, we can be an open book, we can show you that we had this rule for reporting this, or we had this subcommittee, and the subcommittee got its powers from the board, which were delegated to it, and the board got its powers from the members through the Articles of Association. This gives you internal accountability. It doesn't allow finger pointing. It prevents finger pointing internally. Externally is just as important, and it goes to not just making more money, but also if something goes wrong, if you are scrutinised, then that allows you to say, well, here's a picture of our structure. These are all the codes of practice we have in place. This is how we work. Easier to receive wider recognition and support. This is really a subset of the points that I make above. But again, if you're dealing with governments, if you're dealing with sponsors, if you're dealing with other sporting bodies, if you wanted to become affiliated more broadly with your IOC, they will expect governance. They will expect good governance. They will expect accountability. They will expect transparency. And it makes your life easier in all your dealings. How to make governance work. So we've decided that governance is not a bad thing. This really is, I suppose it goes back to my point about having been involved in at the coalface of organisations for the last 30 years, as well as advising organisations. These are societies, these are human beings, and your starting point might almost be to just draw a list of people, just draw a list of companies, make the best use of your resources, because there's no point. I could say to you, oh, here is the governance system that AstraZeneca uses. Look at this. And they might have 20 subcommittees. They might have specialists of all types. But if you've only got 6 people and 4 of you are working full time already, then you're not going to be thanking me for having recommended that. You have to tailor what you do to the people that are available, and your skills. But also be gentle and be truthful, be honest. I'm sure we've all been in organisations where actually we've been given jobs that we're just entirely unsuited for. I was on the IT innovation committee of a firm in which I was a partner. God knows why they put me on this. And I lasted 1 meeting. In fact, I was uninvited without my even being told I'd been uninvited. It's just my name disappeared from this. It was apparent after 1 meeting that I had neither the skills nor the inclination nor the talent to work on that committee. However, there were other committees. I have other skills. And there were other committees where I was the appropriate person. Also, be gentle on yourselves. Don't aim for perfection. Don't aim. Give everybody the benefit of the doubt. Unless you're paying top dollar for somebody as an external advisor, frankly, just give people leeway and hear their stories. And if you are late to do a report, or you thought you were going to do a report, but actually it seems meaningless, then just discuss it. Just discuss it. Ask for help. So at the outset, Danny mentioned that not many of you might have met me. And in a way, that's good, I suppose, because it suggested that everything's going fine. But we are a resource. I am a resource. And I would be those organisations which have asked for help. I've always been delighted to have that opportunity. That is what we are here to do, is the IRL. But also ask for help from each other. Look across at your other, if you're in, I know this already happens, but if you're within the South American Congress of Nations, it may well be that you've a lot in common. Don't ever assume that there's anything new under the sun when it comes to governance, when it comes to problems, when it comes to human nature, because there really isn't. ask for help. Ask for help from us, ask for help from each other. Bring in independent voices. Now, this can be a challenge, but it is, you know what you know, and you know yourselves, but you don't know what you don't know. And this, I think, has been one of the most significant changes, I think, in the IRL's view of the world and the IRL's ability to function and grow, has been encouraging a greater range of voices, a greater range of independence. We got independent board members. We're going to change over again. And people from outside the sport, or people from different walks of life. We've no monopoly on wisdom, and it also helps with accountability. It's just refreshing. It's just refreshing. I'm sure we've all experienced that wonderful thing when we've invited somebody to a game of rugby league and they've gone, my God, why has this been all my life? So let's bring in independent voices. Let's bring in independent people. Be transparent. Be open. And this I think comes, it's hand in hand with be gentle on yourselves and know what you're meant to be doing. And be as open as you can be about the challenges, about your successes. I know they say, oh, success has many fathers and failure is an orphan, but actually don't be like that. There is no failure if we are learning, if we are improving. If we've tried something and it doesn't work, that's we tried it in good faith. So be transparent internally, be transparent externally. Spread the word. Be flexible. It might be that your constitution envisages you meeting 5 times a year, but actually you can only ever find time to meet 3 times a year. Bear in mind that your constitution is an internal document. It might be that the members are perfectly happy. So if you're a board, you're answerable to members fundamentally. If the members may turn around and say, do you know, we know you're busy, we know that it's all going smoothly, don't sweat the small stuff. Communicate clearly externally and ensure they are understood. And this again takes us back to sort of human nature and the importance of making governance work for you. If you have a 20-page governance document and nobody reads it, then, and I'm sure that's happened to thousands of pages that I've written over the years, it hasn't really served its purpose. So try to summarize, try to make sure that the most important messages from governance, the most important messages from structure are communicated. Make sure that, so don't just send a 20-page document to somebody and assume that they're going to read it cover to cover. If you could pick up the phone and speak to them and say, oh, this is what we're trying to do, or come up with a 1-page crib sheet. So you could say, well, we communicated clearly with our members, we communicated clearly with the outside world, and have put out there all the relevant information. But you need to hear back. You need to make sure that what you said has been understood. And so always ask yourself 2 things when it comes to communication around governance. First is, have I communicated to the people the thing that needs communicating? And then always come back to, have they heard it and have they understood it? Because otherwise you can get a disconnect. Otherwise you can find yourself going, well, we invited you to the annual general meeting every year for the last 5 years, and now because you haven't attended, you're no longer a member. And that member may turn around and say, I had no idea that was a requirement on me. So this is the day-to-day, but be human, enjoy each other's company, tell each other stories, find a structure that works for you, for where you are in your development, for where you are culturally as well. It might be that you are in a culture where people like long documents. People like long meetings. It might be you're in a culture where people want to sit around and the meeting will take as long as it takes and everybody wants to speak. Just tailor what you do to your society, tailor what you do to the human beings that you're dealing with. Enjoy it. Applying governance principles for international rugby. Here, there are actually more lines going off in different directions, but it just struck me that because because you're national governing bodies, you are both members of IRL, either full or affiliate, I suppose, or of confederations, which may be ERL and APRL, but you've also got your own members, and your own members will in turn have their own members. There's sort of a spider's web, I suppose, of governance. Looking most narrowly at governance for national governing bodies, the key elements to that are going to be who are the members, what are the conditions for membership, who generally these will be clubs, I suppose, and who's the board and how does the board operate. But also bear in mind that you wear other hats and you have a say and a seat at the table when it comes to driving the IRL, when it comes to driving APRL, when it comes to driving ERL. We are the body responsible for organising International Rugby League, but you are our members, so you can tell us, you can ask us. So when it comes to good governance, you play a role in our good governance. You play a role in holding us accountable. And the principles which I'm outlining here, they should apply to the IRL. You should feel that you are properly communicated with and that you understand what it is that we are saying to you. And if not, then, well, my contact details are at the end of this. Then I think we should have a discussion about it, because governance is a live matter all the time. We're there for clubs. We're there for international teams. We're there to get people on the field. We're there for people to play the greatest game. The 3 World Cups that we saw last year encapsulated so much that was great about our game. Inclusivity, wonderful matches, people just sharing ideas, sharing common culture from all corners of the world. There are other key players that might or might not have a part to play in governance. So again, going back to the principles of good governance and what makes governance work, that could be important when it comes to governments. It can be important specifically when it comes to sports ministries. It can be important when it comes to dealing with players' bodies. Sorry, that's not the bodies of the players, that's the representative bodies for players, I should have said. And dealing with leagues, say the RFL and the NRL and other professional leagues. Amateur leagues will often be organised separately and have their own drivers and have their own requirements and have their own wishes. So you do not exist in a vacuum, is my point. And so there are decisions that you would need to think about when it comes to, say, how your national governing body will establish relationships with authorising bodies like governments, like sports ministries, how it would negotiate with, how it would listen to the players as a separate collective, and how it deals with the separate companies or separate organisations which organise the leagues. It might be that in many of your organisations there aren't separate players' bodies, and the leagues are exactly the sorts of things that you organise, as well as making sure that you put the international team on the field. There's also, I suppose, something that I should mention, which will apply to a greater or lesser extent which is around which is where you've got diaspora. So your players, your community of members may not be all based within the country in which you are based, or the international team that you represent. Where again, you've got you may have diaspora bodies that you ought to be dealing with. So my point here is that narrowly make sure you get your internal governance right, but more generally do it in a way which, you know, bear in mind that you are part of a spider web of other interconnected relationships where the dynamics will be different, and each of them will have its own governance. Each of them will have its own principles when it comes to making sure that it works. So again, get the right people, get the right roles, make sure it's understood. If not, ask a question, ask for help if you need to. We're all in this together. Organizational overview. So this is having looked more at the general principles of what might be called good governance, having looked at what it is that we're trying to achieve, and also having sort of taken a helicopter view of where you stand relative to other organizations. This takes us back to what you might generally consider to be good governance. Now, I've said company here, though it could be that you are an unincorporated organization. You will be a I have to be careful because in English law, you're likely to be talking about companies, but there is lots of different ways. You could be a partnership, you could be even a set of trustees, but there will be a central organization which will have a name, and that organization will have a constitution, and that constitution will deal with things like, how is your board made up? How often do your board meetings take place? What is the quorum for your board meetings? Do you need to have a secretary? How are decisions made? Do you set up do you establish a chief executive? What are the duties of the chief executive? One of the guiding principles of the boards in English law and most Commonwealth countries is that they owe their duty to the company, which is generally considered to be owing a duty of care to the members. Now, this is a, I was going to say sensitive topic, perhaps that's the wrong way to put it, but you'll bear in mind that you will often have on boards of this nature people that will wear more than one hat. So they will be not only a board member of this particular company, but they will be a representative of a member. In our case, we have, in the IRL's case, we have appointees of ERL and APRL. And we also have, there are other members who are entitled to appoint their board members. When they go into that board meeting, they are acting on behalf of the company, independently on behalf of the company. It can be blurred, and there are rules around direct conflicts of interest whereby which mitigate the risk of somebody just being in the room and having a casting vote over something that might fundamentally affect them directly with their other hat on. But it's important that it is understood by everybody on the board when they are in that board meeting, when they're acting in that capacity, they do what's best for that company. So beneath that, you'd have delegated executive functions, and this comes back to a slide from a little while ago, and my point about don't try to be AstraZeneca if actually there's only half a dozen of you. There are lots and lots of things that the board will do, and the board will generally decide on key contracts, key decisions, the strategy, the day-to-day business of the organisation. But the board does not generally do everything all day, every day. And so beneath that, you may have a chairman who may have casting vote. You may have a vice chairman. In the IRL, it has generally been the convention that if we've had a Southern Hemisphere chairman, we would have a Northern Hemisphere vice chairman. There may be some useful rules around that you could bear in mind, depending on how the constituents of your board. Chief Executive Officer. So these are the people who. So this would be Danny, and before Danny, it'd be Nigel. Before Nigel, it was David. I'm not sure we had one before David. I assume back in the day, Maurice Lindsay was a one-man chairman and board and chief executive and everything else. Chief Financial Officer. You may not have a chief financial officer, but you will need independent financial scrutiny. You will need auditors. You will need to make sure that you have a bank account and what goes in and what goes out, and your financial commitments are properly recorded. I cannot stress that too highly. This is exactly the point where a lot of well-meaning organisations run into difficulty, and nobody wants to be in that world. Risk and compliance. I suppose that's a role sometimes taken by people of a legal kind, sometimes taken people of a financial kind. It's looking at things that may go wrong. Communications, internal and external. Obviously, we have a much wider range of potential communications now than we used to have. It's also making sure that you, so it's not just you telling the outside world what the outside world needs to know about you, but also making sure that you pick up on and monitor all of the other communications which are relevant to you. So things that your confederation put out, things that the IRL put out, things that the government put out, which are pertinent to you. We talked about independent directors, the secretary function, which is a somewhat old-fashioned function in this day and age, but make sure that your decisions are written down, make sure that your minutes are written down, make sure that somebody is sending out notices for meetings, your general meetings and members, your annual general meetings. Going down slightly further into the day-to-day of the greatest game, rules and disciplinary is likely to be an area which you're going to be thinking about. Medical issues. We can't stress too highly the importance of making sure that the ways in which games are conducted is as far as possible, bearing in mind your resources, bearing in mind everything else, in line with the best possible up-to-date medical standards internationally and for your own company and for your own country. You may have separate organisations for men's, women and wheelchair games, and also, I suppose, PDSL games as well. So the point there is that the board will pass these down often to other people who will report back to them. So that is an organisation overview. We've talked about most of these as we've gone. I did mention trustees because it might be that in some countries it's beneficial for you to set yourselves up as a charitable trust as opposed to a company, in which case the trustees become they take on a similar role to the board, but they have slightly different functions. So they're not entirely interchangeable. One of the beauties of a corporate system in most jurisdictions is that gives you limited liability, so that it's the company that enters into contracts, it's the company that would be sued, and it's not the board members or the members themselves that would suffer financial loss if everything went wrong. Chief Executive Officer, we talked about. Chief Financial Officer, we talked about. you might have somebody separate that would work on fundraising. I included within Chief Financial Officer, though I suppose it could be elsewhere because it's sort of risk and compliance. Insurance. There's not much to be said about this other than make sure that you've got the right insurance and make sure it is comprehensive. Make sure you do talk to insurers. Don't take for granted that this is your relationship with insurers should be live and should be regular. Your broker should be able to help you as to what is industry standard. Stay close to them, make sure they understand you. Grants, huge sums of money can be available to people. And this takes us back to my point about governance as a means to make money. If you are applying for a grant, then they will expect you to fill in lots of pieces of paper, and the information from that piece of paper should be generated by the day-to-day governance. So they will ask for your finance, they will ask for your equal opportunities statements, they will ask for your corporate and social responsibility, they will ask for your membership figures. But if you get that all in order, then that can unlock for you the money that you need to grow exponentially. So there are nationally and internationally, there are big sums of money that's available to organisations such as ours. Legal and Compliance Risk Officer, so that's compliance with relevant laws, and also looking at potential affiliations, but also disputes. And I'll talk about disputes in a moment. Communications, we talked about internal and external. Serve the members. So I should almost have had this sort of front and centre. So the board should bear in mind, I know a lot of boards do consider themselves to be all powerful, and good on them. They do terrific things, but it does them no harm to be reminded that the boards are servants to the members. And if the members are not getting what the members need, if the members do not understand what they are meant to be doing, then that is a failure of governance. That's a failure of day-to-day operation of the board. The IRL is here to serve its members. Your confederations are there to serve their members, and you are there to serve your members. Some challenges. We have seen issues over the years which have placed stress on organisations. Now, financial could be financial misfeasance, i.e. money going missing, or it can just be you've just not got enough money to run your organisation. What can you do to protect yourself? Well, make sure that your accounts are in order. When money is concerned, people look very closely at governance. They look very closely at audit. Financial, keep your financial affairs in order. Make sure it's transparent. Make sure that you can hand them on to external third parties. Make sure you can hand them on to the people that will come after you. Membership challenges. So this goes back to, you mitigate this by making sure that you've set up your organisation so that it listens to and is in touch with its members. But that doesn't mean to say you won't get membership challenges. You won't find that they may be unhappy with you. Bear in mind that in most organisations, they may have the power to replace the board. So making sure that there is a cordial relations between you and your members is important. The other issue around this can be that you might have rival organisations for the role of national governing body. We have seen repeatedly over the years more than one body in a territory claiming to be the national governing body. There, again, as the incumbents, people will look at your governance, people will look at your rules, people will look at your how you've gone about your business. So say if somebody came along to the IRL and said, actually, it isn't the existing national governing body isn't the right governing body, it should be us, we have a process to go through, and we have, our starting point would be to talk to our member. And we have, as you know, we require certain information from members, so we should be able to keep track with what's happening. Good governance is very, very useful. It is a shield in these sorts of positions. You're being able to say, we actually have these rules, we apply these rules, and we've had AGMs, they've had the ability to come to meetings, we've had dialogue, we've had proper communications. All these things strengthen your hand against challenges. Corruption allegations, there have been a few of these, and this can come into a variety of different ways, generally financial, but it can also be conflicts of interest or other kinds of malfeasance, contracts that undervalue, or sponsorships that don't seem to sort of add up, if you like. This can be very stressful. All of this can be very stressful. But again, if you're able to point to it and say, when it comes to contracts, this is the person that's got the delegated authority to deal with them. This was the process we go to for authorising this. This is the minutes of this meeting where it was approved, and this person declared their conflict of interest and stepped aside. All of that paper trail makes your life easier further down the line. Attacks from other bodies and attacks from other sports. I don't want to say too much about this, but I think there is there has been historically been the case that ours is a game that's had to fight for itself against opposition from external forces because of our history, and that the relationships between the codes, relationships with governments have traditionally varied hugely across the rugby league world. But if you are going to be attacked from other bodies and you are going to be attacked from other sports, then if you come back to the principles of good governance, have you kept in touch with people? Have you communicated with people? Have you got a vision? Have you made sure that everything is working towards that vision? Have you got a bank account? Have you kept a track of all your finances? Have you got a board with a wide range of skills? Are you making the most of everything that's available to you? External attacks, they put stress on an organisation, they put stress on people. And the best that you can hope for at that point is that everybody understands their roles, everybody understands what's been required of them, and everybody can turn around and say, and be gentle to one another, say, we are a functioning society, we will fight this together. So good governance may be a bit dull, but it can be really, really handy. How to move forward. I hope this has been helpful. As I say, I went back and thought, if I was talking to the young Birch 20 years ago, what would I have said to myself? And I think it would have been, understand that organisations are societies full of human beings with human beings' quirks that exist within the social world in which they find themselves. Take stock constantly. What we're looking for is a system which is robust and adaptable and flexible and will go on forever. So don't be afraid just to have a look at it and go, do you know, we seem to have too many people over 60 in this role, and maybe we should be getting young blood in, or actually, come to think of it, we've got 20 members and we only ever hear from 2. Maybe we ought to be picking up the phone to the other 18, that sort of thing. Ask for help. Ask us. ask your confederations, ask each other. Even if it's simply, we think this works, but have you ever come across this? Could you take a look? You know, we could do an audit for you. This is exactly what we're here for. Our governance requires us to help grow the game of International Rugby League. And if we're not helping our members do that, then we are falling short. If you do want to make changes, be realistic. Don't be harsh on people. Here, you know, make sure that you've got the resources and the people to move from where you are further ahead. You'd be surprised. Also, advertise. You'd be amazed at the new insights that, you know, that make sure that the constituent people who might be interested hear that you're interested in hearing from them. I'm conscious that we've only got 2 minutes, so it might be that we have follow-up questions, issues separately. I'm happy. My email address is on there. There's also, I don't know if this is a hyperlink, but maybe Charlotte and Danny can send it around so people can have a look at other organisational documents. And that is my overview. So that's my presentation on governance and things I wish I'd known 30 years ago.
Thank you very much, David. That's really much appreciated. As David has said, there's not that much time left. I'm sure everyone's got a busy day, but if there is any questions immediately, if you want to stop sharing, yeah, thank you, David. If there's any questions immediately, people, if they want to ask them in the plenary, you can use the raise hand function in Teams, and maybe David can field answers. Such a vast subject. Governance is never a subject that you finish with. It always needs to be reviewed. But as David said, we are here. There's a lot of people with good experience of good governance in theory and practice in our organisation, so we're at your disposal. So if anybody does have any questions, giving a sweep of the room, does not appear that anybody has got their hand up. Final call. No, okay, so you got David's address. Thank you very much, David, again. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending at different hours of the day, and have a good rest of the week. Goodbye.
Take care, everyone. Bye.